Welcome to the fastest staff in town. Today we're Masechet Yevamot Daf Chav Ches. We are going to begin on the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom words V'lei Malei. So we were learning in a situation that you had 4 brothers, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, and 2 of those brothers, let's say Shimon and Levi, married 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah, and those 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi, died, and therefore because of that, Rachel and Leah now are zokuk in order to be able to do yibum. You have Reuben, Yehuda still alive, so it says Hari elu choltzos vo misyavamos. So he said that these brothers should do chalitza and not yibum. So now we're up to, based on that, v'leima le. Why doesn't we say, and this is according to the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan above, my choltzos na b'detani choletzes chada. Maybe it only means that one of them should do chalitza, but not the other. So the Gemara answers choltzos katani, which is mashma, not just one. V'leimale, my choltzos the alma, hari elu katani, v'leima de cholotz lel rishayna bereisha. Why don't we say, when it says choltzos, again, choltzos means choltzos di alma, that it's just referring to choltzos in general, but again, it's really only talking about one. And when it says choltzos, the chalitza is done, it was l'rishayna bereisha. It's referring to the first one. It says Rashi, desu lo mishtaria shniya, that according to Rabbi Yochanan, once the first one was done, then the second one is no longer mutter. Shon nearest b'shas tefila. So our answer is choltzos. When it says choltzos, that's l'chatchil katani. So that's referring to, that is what is the preferable method. Says Rashi, mashma, claimer ein kan takana cheres. There's no other option. There's no yibum afterwards. But again, the way he'll say it is, but I hold there is a takana of doing chalitza to the second one, then to do yibum to the first. V'lei malei gezerah dilma kadim v'cholotz rishayna bereisha. Why would he say that you can just, again, do this extra takana of doing chalitza to the second one and then yibum to the first? What happens if you did it the other way around? What if you did chalitza to the first one, and therefore, according to him, that's not acceptable? V'lo tisya. So the answer is v'lo misyavamos katani. Deleka din yibum hacha klal. So as Rashi says, the inami cholz shniya. You're right. Even in the situation we did chalitza the second one, ein kan yibum. V'leimul gezer shema yomos. Why don't we say there's a chance that he'll die? Vasal vatal misasivamin. Because once he does yibum with her, says Rashi, as we saw in the beginning of this parak, dilma ada meyabim chad meis idoch. That let's say if Reuven does yibum with one of them, and then in the meanwhile, before Yehuda was able to do chalitza with the other sister, so Yehuda dies. So in that situation, and we are goyzer this notion of misa, so or we're chayshish for misa, so therefore we should say the same thing here. Rav Yochanan misa lechayish. No, according to Rav Yochanan, he's not concerned of misa. That's not something which he is concerned of. V'leimli Rabbi Elazar he. So let's say it's Rabbi Elazar. The Amar Kivan Shamdo Love Sha'achas be'Isser. That once there is even one moment of Isser, Neser Love Oilamus, that she's Asser forever. So Rashi quotes, this is actually Gemara much later on, Rabbi Elazar he, Rabbi Elazar he, the under the Army Karabanan. So maybe Rabbi Elazar has that chash, but not that everyone holds like the sheet of Rabbi Elazar. So Gemara says, okay, but with the sefer Rabbi Elazar, if the fact that later on it says, the sefer says, if you look at Rashi, Mastis Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar, Oimer Beishami Omrim Yikaimu, that Rabbi Elazar qualifies the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and says that when it comes to Beis Shammai, if the guy is not really supposed to have married her, but if he did, he can remain married. Beis Hillel says Yotzia, they have to leave. So the fact he mentions his name there is l'chayr. That means Reish Olav Rabbi Elazar must be the beginning of the Mishnah is not like Rav Elazar. So you can't establish the ratio of our Mishnah like him and say, okay, that's like him, but I hold like the Ramana. Fine. V'leimul hu says Rashi. Why don't we say the lo yadinan hey nefel b'reisha? Let's say we don't know which woman fell first, which husband died first. The nemul echol shniya. So because let's say nemul hu the nafel b'vasachas. Maybe they both fell at the same time, which means both their husbands died, and therefore one is not before the other. Rabbi Yossi Glili, he diamer eshel samsem. And according to Rabbi Yossi Glili, he says that there is the possibility of samsem to say that one was before the other. So lo stam lantana Rabbi Yossi lo sasam lantana Rabbi Yossi Glili. Fine. So v'lei mulei delu yadinan hey nafel b'reisha. Why don't we just say we just don't know? That's what it says. That if he did do yibum, then he has to leave that marriage. Bishlam Arishona, I can understand by the first brother, Amrin and Lay, Mansharilach. We can say, who gave you permission to marry her? Therefore you have to leave. El Shnia, the second brother, Amar Chavroi, Shnia Yibim, Ana Rishayna Miyabim. So, and by a case of Suffolk Achosukukaso, we're saying he's not required to be Yoitziu, but the Mishnah says he must divorce. But l'chayr, this is a case of Suffolk Achosukukaso. So, because we said we just don't know. Right? That's why we said at the end of yesterday's shir that I don't know who's the one who established this whole statement about achayos. And then it says Tanan Hoysa achas mehen surah al echad iser erva aser ba umuter b'achaysa. So let's say one of them has an iser to one of the brothers, an iser erva. So aser ba umuter b'achaysa. So he said again, you have two sisters, and the reality is because it's not a case of a tsara, even though we know that Saras Ereva is released, if, let's say, Reuven was related to Rachel, so therefore if Rachel and Leah were married to the same man, so then by virtue of the fact that she's an Ereva to Reuven, then the Saras Ereva is also mutter. But this is not that case because they are not married to the same man. Therefore, even though he's also obviously to the Ereva, he's mutter b'achaysa. B'asheni asur b'shneihen. However, both brothers, both women are going to be asur to the other brother. Fine. So, let's see if there's a Rashi explaining this. Okay. So, Salcha Daita, so we thought in the Havamina, the Nafal Chamoisat Chila. Now what happened was, the mother-in-law is the one that fell to you first. And therefore, because this was Reuven's mother-in-law, so she was an Ereva, and since she was an Ereva to him, so she is obviously free. Whereas, V'mai, Leiku Chosan Liyabein, Hach De'enu Chamoisa Bereisha. The question is, why doesn't the other guy do Yibum? Because it's not an Ereva. So why can't Yehuda marry this woman? So what's the whole problem? If she was originally mutter to Yehuda, and then only afterwards, let's say what happens, the other brother died. So in that situation, okay, fine, at that moment she's now usher, but then once Yibum, or let's say Yibum is done, or Chalitza is done by Reuven, so then Yehuda should be mutter to the other woman, because she's not her Ereva, it's his brother's mother-in-law. So my papa could go into Nafal Hach Te'enu Chamois Bereisha. What happened was the other way around, that the one who was not the Chamoso fell first, and then the mother-in-law. So in Rashi says, Zusha Asra as Hacheres Nafal Tchila. So again, let's say the mother-in-law fell first. There's a mother-in-law to Reuven. But Haidanacha Chamoso Chad Marayos Nakat. It doesn't mean that one. It can be any of the Arayos, but it's got to be obviously one that there's no relationship to the other brother. V'nicha laminke milsa the shchicha, something which is common. V'sharayos tiricha milsa lashchuche. It's harder to come up with. Amai sheni aser b'shneihen. Why is he aser to marry this woman, this other brother Yehuda? Leiku chasen shel rishon. Let Reuven go, li'avim l'shniya, and marry the other woman, de'enu chamosa, which is not, again, it's she was married to a different brother, so let him do yibum, de'enu achos akuka, that's not achos akuka, that ta'avi chamosa l'gabi idach, ach yevama shehuter b'shas tefila, because she was considered to be mutter at that time. Rand says, no, it's the other way around. Could go into nafal hach de'enu chamosa b'reisha. So v'i b'miyabin law hech b'reisha. If let's say the guy did yibum first, so paisha shniya sheneser mishas nefilasa, then the second one will be also at that time. Hilchach sula mahani la heter. So there is no longer a heter. Weiter. So Rebbe Lezer Omer Beishami Omrim. So again, the case of our Mishnah, let's just remind ourselves of what the Mishnah said. You had 4 brothers. 2 of them were married to 2 sisters. And as we said, Shimon and Levi died. So we said in the Mishnah, you're supposed to do chalitza, don't do yibum. However, if one of the brothers, instead of doing chalitza, does yibum, so that's where there's a machlokas. Rabbi Lezer says, Beis Shammai says, yikayim, they can remain married. And Beis Hillel says, no, they have to leave from that marriage. So the Gemara says as follows. Tanya, Rabbi Lezer Omer Beis Shammai Omer Mikaimu, Beis Hillel Omer Yotziu. Rav Shimon Omer Yikaimu, and Rabbi Abba Shaul Omer Kal Hoyel Lehem LeBeis Hillel B'Davar Zeh. In this situation, Beis Hillel says they have to leave, but Abba Shaul says that Kal Hoyel Lehem Beis Hillel B'Davar Zeh Shebeis Shammai Omer Yotziu, Beis Hillel Omer Yikaimu. Actually, he flips it around and says that Beis Shammai is the one who says they have to leave. And therefore, he's the one who's more strict, and Beis Hillel is more lenient. Beis Hillel Yikaimu. Shimon Kaman, Ike Beis Shammai, Hanu Rebbe Lezer. Ike Beis Hillel, Hanu Abba Shaul. Hachi Karbel, Nechel Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, B'davar Zeh. He says that they actually don't argue in this matter. Fine. Weiter. Haisa achas mehen. So, what is the next case? So, let's look at the Mishnah. So, the Mishnah said, if, let's say, Hais achas mehen masura al zeh iser ereva, shnia sura al zeh iser ereva. So, each of the 2 sisters, we're talking about the same case, Shimon and Levi died. So, you have Rachel and Leah who are sisters. Now, Ruvain is an ereva to only one of them, and Yehuda is an ereva to one of them. So, in this, the Mishnah says, obviously, again, they're not married to the same man, so it's not a case of Tsaras Ereva. So the Mishnah over here tells us that in that case, Asur Lazem Muteras Lazem, Asur Lazem Muteras Lazem. So the one who's obviously Asur is mutter to the other one, and vice versa. So there's no issue as far as them being able to. There's no question they're able to get married to one another. Okay, so let's continue with the Gemara. So the Gemara says as follows. So again, Reuven can do yibum with the other sister, even though he's an erva to the other sister. So hatanina chadazimna l'chayra, that was learned elsewhere, as it says achosa kashi yevimta. The sister who is the Yevama, ochaletzes omis yavemes. So it says you can actually do yibum. So what is that? Let's look at Rashi. Achosa shel ereva, the sister of the ereva, kishihi yevimta ochaletzes yavemes. V'hainu nami aser bo moter b'achosa. So it's obviously you're not allowed to marry her because she's your ereva, but you're allowed to marry her sister. That's exactly what is mentioned in our Mishnah. So the question is, what is the purpose of saying it again? So our answer is, Sricha. Diash mi'inon hasam. If you only mention it over there, Mishum deleko migzer Mishum sheni, then you would not maybe make a gezerah because of the second one. because over here, there's not just one brother. Here we're talking about two brothers. There's also Yehuda. So what is the whole gezerah? Says Rashi, Yehuda leika elachad. There's only one brother. V'leika migzer midi. There's nothing to be geyser. Avahachad hikla migzer dilma asa sheni leavumi ba'achas v'kapaga ba'achas sukukaso de kamedi de haviramya turvayu emafilu hai do rama arabia kame liyavim kamashmuan. So you would think, since the other brother, let's say again, let's look in Rashi. Let's read this again. What happens? The other brother comes and does yibum with one of them, ba'achas, and then the sister, it's achos sukukaso, de kame dide haviramya turvayu. So in this situation, let's say, as he says, afilu haidulu rami erva kame. Let's say there's no erva by him. Lo yavim kamashmuan. So in other words, let's say one of them is an erva, one's not an erva at all, and he does yibum with the one who is not an erva. So therefore, ends up causing is that this is achasukukaso. So this was the sister of the one that was zakuk to you. Okay, so therefore that perhaps that could be the gezerah. Since the other brother is not doing anything, so it's clear. Again, it potentially could be achasukukaso, as we're going to see here. That'll be the other side. The Yishmin has mishum deleika migzer mishum sheni. The v'hachadika migzer mishum sheni emelo. Maybe we're not going to allow it because there's a second brother over here. It could cause problems. Again, elements of confusion. V'yashmin and hacha mishum deika sheni. The kamoichach. Over here, maybe the opposite. Because you have a second brother, it's clear. It says Rashi, midalom yabim hai. Ba'achas, the fact he didn't do a yibum with one of them, ika hakera de achasukukasa asura. Then it's proof that achasukukaso, the sister of the one who's zakuk to you, is asur. V'hai diabim hai mishum time of the erva lo ramya kamei. The reason why this happened was because there was an element of erva. V'lo asi l'mishri achasukukasa ba'alma. We don't want to matter achasukukaso in a general circumstance where there is no erva. So in the case of erva, so the fact that there's erva, that's the reason why he didn't do anything. Since the other brother is not doing anything, so it's clear it's because of there's an issue of achasukukaso. Avahasam doleka sheni neimolot tzricha. Okay, let's see if there's a question over here. Haisa achas mehem asura. So my kamash hacha v'hagtani le perak sheni. Where do you learn this? So question 13. Havami the hacha the equal migzer mishum ach sheni dolagabov the havili achasukukaso. She's achasukuka. She's the sister of the one who's zalka. Kamash mula gazrinan. So the point is that we're not geyser in this situation. Okay. Let me just find this here. Mishum sheni abul hacha the equal migzer mishum sheni imulo. That was question 13, and possibly also TA. Arba achin maha achasheni mutter. So it's arba achin shnaim nesuin bez achoyos ha'is achas me'asura. One's mutter ha'im achasheni mutter. So im nafal ha'asura b'rei. Oh, we said this before. Im nafal ha'asura b'reisha. Let's say the mother-in-law. Mutter ba dehavli yevama shehutra ve'im nafla ha'asura acharishona havli yevama shenesra. So that we already had. So let's just mark that down. That was TA11. TA11 was here. Kagun de nafla hachderesha chamosaresha. Okay, weiter. So now the Gemara continues and says the following case: Isser mitzvah. So what is that? So again, let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, let's say we have a situation. Okay, fine. So Isser mitzvah. So Hanami Tanina Well, this was also learned, the whole notion of Isser Mitzvah that you do Chalitza. As we continue to Chav Chesam Beis, Isser Mitzvah v'Isser Kedusha Chaletzas Lomas Yevemas. Says before you do Chalitza. Yohasam Isser Mitzvah l'chuda, hacha Isser Mitzvah v'achaisa. Over there, all there was a case of Isser Mitzvah, and therefore, in case of Isser Mitzvah, so he said, so in that situation, only do Chalitza. But over here, we're talking not just that, says Rashi, because Isser Mitzvah l'chuda, lo ashmi'inan el Yevamot shenafel lefanav shehi asura olav Isser Mitzvah chayletzas. That's all it says. But over here we're talking about Isser Mitzvah ve'achosa, Isser Mitzvah and her sister. So it's this extra situation. Says Rashi, shenafel lo mishnei achen, because two brothers died. The achosa, you had obviously the sister, lo miyavma, deloi tema uki Isser Mitzvah bimkom erva. V'tis yavim achoisa. We don't want you to do yibum with the mitzvah's sister. V'otahavi ka'achos ukukasai. Because again, there's an issue of achos ukukasai. If she is zakuk, it looks like you also can't take the sister, the one who's zakuk to you. Again, hasa Isser Mitzvah chuda, hacha Isser Mitzvah v'achosa. Sachadat chamina, leikum Isser Mitzvah, bimkoim Isser erva, v'tis yavim. You would maybe think you could actually do yibum in this situation. Kamash Mulan. V'tis yavim, kivan d'b'naraisa, ramya kemei, kapaga b'achos ukukaso. Sachadat chamina, misham mitzvah abd rabbanan, kamash Mulan. Weiter. Haisa achas mehen. So, continuing in the language of the Mishnah, Haisa achas mehen. Right, let's just continue. Haisa achas mehen hasu lamli hanuhach. So again, it's the same case. Ma'ali l'chad, ma'ali l'trei. What is the difference between about one or two? Srichad yashmin and hasam mishum deika sheni demochach. As we said before, the second one can prove that there's a din of achas ukukaso, of a hach and a leka sheni. However, since there isn't the second one, the kamoichach, since they're both doing yibum, emalo yashmin and hacha adarabah tervayu moich hadadi. They can prove each other. Aval idach lo tzricha, says Rashi, hacha leka sheni demochach shahari shteim is Yevamos. They're both doing yibum. Yasal mishri achas ukuka ba'alma. Once we allow this guy to do yibum, so maybe you'll think in other situations you'll allow achas ukukaso. Zuhi she'amru v'chu. Again, zuhi, it says this, and limute mai. So it's limute Isser Mitzvah. It's excluding if you're dealing with there's an Isser Mitzvah l'zeh, Isser Mitzvah l'zeh. Hasul amali hanuhach. We said that before. Malichad mali trei. Madatema kilo amrina noiki Isser Mitzvah bimkom Isser erva. When maybe would we say kilo amrina, that we do not say the Isser Mitzvah should go in b'makam Isser erva? Heichad ikal lemigzer mishum sheni. There's a second person. If maybe you would think that in that situation yibum could be done. In all the cases that we saw in the beginning of the Masechta, all the 15 erevas, you can apply this concept of a surazem with teras. V'achosa kashihi yevimta, when it's your sister, she's a yavama, or chaletzas omis yavemes. Then with the other one, you should do chalitza. You could do chalitza or yibum. Rabbi Yehuda metargim mechamoisov elach. She says no, only from the list starting from chamosa, from your mother-in-law and on. Avol shita bebeideresha lo, not the first six. My time kivan debito ba'oinsin hu de mishkachas lo menasuno mishkachas lo, because as we mentioned, one of the cases not it's your daughter because of marriage, but it's your daughter out of wedlock. So that situation, we cannot find the situation of muteras hazeh asur hazeh only in the case the mishkachas lo menasuno As we said, we established it there. And we're only talking about situations of marriage where they were married to each other, not where it was an erev out of wedlock. Says Rashi, Ruvain anas isha. Ruvain had relations with a woman out of wedlock, bas, and they had a daughter. So this girl is an erev to Ruvain. Ubas Shimon v'anas anusas achiv v'hoylid bas, and then Shimon, also out of wedlock, had a daughter. V'nisu bas Ruvain ubas Shimon Levi, and the daughter of Ruvain and the daughter of Shimon, who again these daughters are erevs to Ruvain and Shimon, married Levi. V'Yehuda achi avihen, and Yehuda, their father's brother. They're considered to be related maternally. Bas Shimon muteras Reuven, and Bas Reuven muteras Shimon. So that would be the situation. Okay, weiter. We can find it. However, in the situation where, let's say, Levi was born after Reuven died, in which we say that's also an ereva, that we don't find. As we said before, it's a machlokas Rav Shimon Rabbanan, exactly where that case falls, and because of that, we don't want to mention the machlokas. So Safra mitargim af eshes shlohay ba'olamo mishkachasla b'shita ache. In the case of 6 brothers, V'liyah Rav Shimon, Mesimanich Meis Noilad V'yibim, died, gave birth, and then had Yibum. Meis Noilad V'yibim. Reuven B'Shimon Nesuin Shtei Achayos. If Reuven and Shimon married 2 sisters, Levi Yehuda Nesuin Shtei Nachriyos. Shimon and Levi were married to 2 other women. Meis Reuven, who was married to one of the sisters, died. Noilad Yisachar. And then all of a sudden Yisachar is born after Reuven died, V'yibim Levi, and Levi therefore did Yibum, because he was alive at the time of Reuven's death. May Shimon died, Noilad Zvulun, and all of a sudden another kid is born. So obviously Zvulun was not around when Shimon was alive. V'yibim Yehuda, and therefore Yehuda did Yibum. So you have these 2 other brothers. So Mesu Levi Yehuda below Banim. Now Levi and Shimon, who did Yibum with Reuven and Shimon's wives, but they also now die. V'nafal hu kamei Yisachar Zvulun. Now Yisachar and Zvulun technically are supposed to marry these women. Hasur l'zeh muteras l'zeh, hasur l'zeh muteras l'zeh. Because in the situation, one is usher to the other one is still usher to the other one, but nonetheless mutter to the other. So it's possible you could establish it in that case. Yachosa sheyavimto lamali yivim Yehuda b'lo yibum Yehuda nami mishkachasla mishum tsara. So he says, in the case of Achosa, which is the Yevamot, why do we say that Yehuda does yibum? Even if Yehuda didn't do yibum, we can find there's an issue of tsara. So atinach tsara ma'akamemar, as we always want to establish that there has to be a case of not just a tsar, but tsara, and therefore it can go into handa ninhu nami god ba'asher. So if you add more children to the equation, then you could also have a case of tsara. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see if there's any more questions over here. Question 14. Rav Shimon. Dishtei achayos, when it comes to 2 sisters, lo choltzos lo mesyavamos midiraisa. You don't do chalitza or yibum midiraisa. Madinim kishahis achas mehem asura beiser mitzvah umadua. Adkan.